Sometimes I wish we could go back to a time when things weren't so complicated.
Welcome to the complexity of toilet paper, the podcast that dives into the everyday moments where we overthink, hesitate, or just get stuck.
I'm overthinking. I'm overthinking.
Let's hear it for the toilet paper!
Through honest conversations, unexpected insights, and a whole lot of humor, your hosts Phyllis Martin, Mark Pollock, and Al Emmerich are here to help you roll with it and make your life a little less complicated. One conversation at a time.
That's right, dude. The beauty of this is its simplicity.
Speaking of which, it's time to enter the stall. Put the lid down, or not, depending. Get comfortable, and roll with it.
Oh, worry not, dear friend. It's really quite simple.
This is the complexity of toilet paper.
Let me ask you something. What did you give up to be here today recording this? Mark, Phyllis, person in the potty? What are you sacrificing right now so that your ears can be filled with the melodious tones of this podcast? What is one thing that you would never, ever, ever think you would sacrifice, give up, swap for something else so that something else could happen in your life?
Mark, I think you should go back 2 questions. That last one even threw me.
Yeah,
Well, the show is called The Complexity of Toilet Paper, so I wanted to put a freaking exclamation point at the end of the statement, which is, when we make sacrifices, sometimes it's harder than we think, and we make it harder than we even realize it to be. Because there's nothing simple about sacrifice if you ask the average person. Because tied to the concept of sacrifice is what you're giving up versus what you're gaining. And as a result, so often sacrifice is not as black and white as the holiday would say it is. And thus, that's why we are sitting here today, recording this show shortly on the heels of Memorial Day, to which I was thinking about sacrifice, and we decided, let's do a show on the complexity of sacrifice in all, or at least begin to unpack some of its different meanings. But I probably could have opened with that.
it may have been clearer, but we got here.
A year and some 27, 9, 30 episodes later, Al's noodle is still freaking twisted. Hi, my name is Al Emmerich.
I'm Mark Pollock.
I'm Phyllis Martin.
And this is The Complexity of Toilet Paper. Welcome to the joyride to unravel life's complexities similar to a roll of toilet paper, which by common standards is really quite simple. Yet there are many uses for toilet paper. We won't get into them today, but this show is about unraveling the complexities of life that we all face. And if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to what we call the stall. It's a crowded stall, even though the 3 of us have been here since the very beginning. No guest today except you and your brain. And what we really wanted to have a conversation with you about is sacrifice. Seriously, that's what kind of lit this conversation off. We were coming fresh off recording this, even though it's going to come out way after Memorial Day. But we started thinking about, what is that? It's a celebration of sacrifice, right? The sacrifice of our military. And for me and Phyllis used to live in Jacksonville, and Mark lived in Jacksonville, lives close enough. We are in a military region. We've got a couple of military bases in Jacksonville, Florida, Orange Park. We've got Kings Bay, Georgia, the sub bases. There's military throughout the state of Florida and down in Tampa, Air Force bases. And so if you haven't grown up or been or lived in a military town, maybe you may not realize or if you don't have a connection to the military, that there's so much more than the sacrifice of lives. There's the sacrifice of time, of relocation, family, career, the sacrifice of dreams in many, many ways that goes with that. The sacrifices that children make, the sacrifices that families make to help other families. And that just kind of got us all thinking like, whoa, sometimes we just do. We don't even think about it. We make a sacrifice because it's the right thing to do. And yet we sometimes overthink simple sacrifices that could save our lives. Eating more healthfully, exercising regularly.
Yeah.
And we're by no means going to unpack this all today, but as usual, we don't have a script. We have a topic, we have a direction, and we have a challenge. And that challenge today is to hopefully wrap this show by helping you arrive at some questions about how you define sacrifice and what it means to you. So it's a little more simple, one conversation at a time. So, Phyllis.
Yes.
What does sacrifice mean to you?
Oh, listening to your, do we call it a preamble? I don't know.
Monologue?
Monologue. Thank you.
Diatribe?
Any
brain dump?
I'm struck by something, which is in the context of the sacrifice that people who choose to go into the military make. I am sitting here like with a conundrum in my head about, which is where all conundrums live, by the way, about, we all define sacrifice differently, and we all say that we make sacrifices in different ways. And I'm kind of questioning if that's really the right word. So people say to me, you sacrificed your childhood to take care of your mother. I don't know that I see it that way. I see it as I loved my mother and I took care of her. And I don't know that I now see it as I don't know that I ever actually saw it as a sacrifice. Do I think part of my childhood was lost because of that? Yes, that would be very, very true. But is it a sacrifice? Like, I feel like that has some kind of different notation. And honestly, Al, just in light of the way that you opened the show, which was great. I mean, absolutely great. Or in the context of eating what you want to eat versus eating healthy. Is it really a sacrifice? Is it? I don't know. I think like we say it's a sacrifice because of the context eating healthy has, but we gave it that context. In other places and other spaces, it's just food and you make those decisions. So that's a great way of saying I don't know. I have to think about it now. You give up something, but in the context of sacrifice, do you also get something?
Well, the dictionary says the act of giving up.
You couldn't tell me that first? Go ahead.
This is, well, but no, I think,
teasing you.
Good God, we just went through the jugular right away. I mean, there's Merriam-Webster dictionary definition, but then there's the interpretation of how sacrifice lives in our lives. So right. Here we go. Sacrifice, Merriam-Webster dictionary. A, the act of giving up or losing something of value for the sake of something else. B, something of value given up or lost for the sake of something else. An act of offering to a deity something precious. Something offered in sacrifice. Loss, goods sold at a sacrifice. Sacrifice bunt, you're sacrificing to advance a runner. The transitive verb is to give up or lose something, especially for an ideal belief or end. To offer as a sacrifice, to sell at a loss, and blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, there's the technical definition. Here's what I took from what you said. There's the technical definition, but then there's the intent and the principle behind it. That's what I heard.
And those definitions ring true. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, I just want to comment that I think that was just really profound, Phyllis, as far as how you look at sacrifice. Take the dictionary out of it. to me, I feel very much aligned to what you had to say, Phyllis. When I think of sacrifice, it's not I'm gonna sacrifice this time or this money, and I'm going to start a business, and I'm investing in this thing for it to give me something. I don't think that's a sacrifice. I think it's dedication. I think it's a commitment. I think it's a goal, and you're willing to invest in yourself or invest in other people, but you're looking for an outcome, a positive outcome for yourself. When I think of sacrifice, I think it's really taking something that's valuable of yours and not expecting anything in return for it, right? That to me is sacrifice. And so when I think of like a parent and you had to make a decision to take care of your mom, you weren't looking to gain anything from that, right? You gave up your time, effort, energy, potentially some of your own dreams. That is a sacrifice, because you weren't, in my book, looking for anything. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for a return in that, people, I sacrificed years to build this business. No, you invested. Mm. And so I think we have to be really careful in the word sacrifice.
Yes.
Well, does that same litmus then stand if you're risking your life? If I'm a military, I mean,
what are you getting out of it? If you're military,
no. Yeah. If you are the military person, like my dad was a B-52 bombardier in the Air Force. God bless, he survived, and thank God. I mean, died for another reason, but I mean, the man he didn't choose to. I mean, that's where they put him, and he sat in the bottom of a B-52 bomber with a turret gun.
Wow.
And he could have been blown out of the sky.
For sure.
For that, there's the things that come with the military. There's all the folks who went through Vietnam and all the other wars that have suffered the ills of war. They sacrificed something that they didn't expect potentially, but then also that they knew it was on the line. But is that still sacrifice?
That,
of course,
to
it
me
is.
Absolutely. They got. It's not that they didn't get anything out of it, but they were doing it for the good of so many. Right? It wasn't their own personal good. They were probably thinking about their families, and maybe we get somebody who's in the military and talk about that. But I would imagine, and I'm not in the military, so I struggle making this comment on behalf, but I would imagine you have a greater need to serve others. And so you are sacrificing because you're not really doing it for you. You're doing it for everybody else. And that might be a dream of yours to be in that type of service of others, but
I think it taps on the floor of what I started to say, which is what's the intent of it. Yeah. Sacrifice functionally is the act of giving up something for something else. So functionally, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I love the baseball analogy, right? No baseball coach ever wants to lose a runner on base. No team ever says, oh, good, we can get an out. But a sacrifice fly advances a runner. It moves the cause along, and it gets them closer to a goal of scoring a run. And I think, oddly, it's not like we thought about this. That's what we do. Like we quote unquote sacrifice time for our children. We sacrifice time to produce this show. The functional word is sacrifice, but what's the mindset? I think the nuance is when it becomes resentful. And all too often, what I see is we celebrate the sacrifices that are obvious, which we should, the military sacrifices, but we forget the small little nuanced sacrifices that people make for the betterment of society. And we don't talk enough about that. But when we do talk about sacrifice, it's usually strapped with some sort of a negative. Like, I had to sacrifice this for that, versus, how'd you say it in the beginning, Phyllis? You said, God, I wish I could repeat it. Like, when you were in the nonprofit sector, which still are, like, do you view the time that when you're not at home with Tim or you're not at home with Finn, I just realized how close they almost rhyme. Tim and Finn, like a radio show. Is that a sacrifice?
No, I don't. That's my work. I mean, that's a choice, and that's my work, and I get something. I get something from that. I don't feel like that is a choice. Also, I'm hesitant to say this, but I'm going to say it. Like, I have high sensitivity. I'm not sacrificing my life. My life is not on the line when I go to work every day. People in the military are putting their lives on the line for the betterment of people they will never ever know, for the betterment and the protection of ideals that have created this country. And that's, I think, where I was coming from when you asked me the question. That is a sacrifice. Like, that is for sure, in my mind, a sacrifice. You are willing to trade your life. Maybe trade isn't the right word. Putting your life on the line for a nation of people. Like, the magnitude is overwhelming to me, and I am very sensitive about this. I just, in the best possible way. But when I go to work, nothing, what is at risk? My reputation, that I might say something incorrectly, or I might make a mistake and get fired. That's like, no, it's not a sacrifice. It's actually a gift to be able to do this kind of work, and hopefully, do it well.
Is it more than that the benchmark for sacrifice? Like, we hear so many people say, "Oh, I sacrificed this to go to Disney," or "I sacrificed this to go to this conference," and it's like, again, I think we're talking close to around the same thing. Like, what are you really sacrificing? Versus a parent who does sacrifice to care for them, even though it's the thing that they had to do and they needed to do, and it was the right thing to do. There's still an opportunity cost. That's another way to talk about this, is opportunity cost, right? But I think it's so flippantly thrown around and discarded today that we don't really consider
their choices.
Yeah. And that could sound judgy. And I'm fully aware you could be listening to this and going, it's a little judgy. I'm not condemning one way or the other. I think we're talking about this because if I could give one walkaway before we even get to that point, the walkaway is for us to intentionally ask, is it sacrifice? What am I really giving up?
When I think of complexity, right, and what makes it complex, I do go back to this mind game that we're trying to play, and I think it's in the realm of semantics. But I got my MBA as an adult. I had to give up time with my kids. I had to give up time on weekends. I had to miss some fun event stuff. I could go back and say, oh, look at all the stuff that I sacrificed in order to do this. Or I could have the mindset that I prioritized and allocated time, and based at that point in my life, I prioritized getting an education so later on I could provide better for my family. And then I invested in myself to do that. I didn't sacrifice anything, right? I did lose out on time with them at that point to provide for them a better future. And so I struggle with that word because, to Phyllis's point earlier, when we come off Memorial Day and we think of the sacrifice that our military and first responders, even, on the daily basis, these are groups that run into fires, run into crimes, run into bad things happening. That's a sacrifice, and it's a sacrifice for their families as well. And they have also made that commitment that they're willing to miss out on a particular future for the betterment of society. And there's a quote that, and I'll stop talking for a second, but there's a quote that I heard. It was part of a television show, but I loved this quote. And I think it kind of relates. A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in.
We say that, Mark, in the sector all the time. Like, people are planting seeds today for trees that whose shade they will never sit under. It's true.
God, Can you say that again, Mark?
Sure. A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in.
Or old women.
Or old women. That's, if I was making the quote, I would have.
Of course you would.
When people plant trees. How about that? A society grows great when people plant trees whose shade they know they'll never sit in.
All right. I'm going to throw out, this is directly from an AI conversation I was having earlier, but it says society has fundamentally misunderstood sacrifice by viewing it primarily as a transaction, giving up something to get something, rather than a transformative practice that shapes identity and builds community. Let's just pause there for a minute.
I think that's what I said. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it is.
No, I'm just
no
kidding.
it is.
I'm teasing you.
No, but it's this beautiful. By the way, Mark, your light's really hot in your forehead, and you look like you're glowing. And we may need to go ahead and bring you into like one of those anti-radiology.
Better you than me tonight, Mark.
Man, I'm just glowing. I'm just glowing because of the topic.
Yes,
it is. You're still hot as can be. Like your head looks like an X-ray machine.
Oh, geez.
Attacked
leave
it.
him alone.
He's
ugly.
a beautiful
I think that's
man.
all it is. I'm just ugly, and the light accentuates
You're
how
not
ugly I am.
Ugly. All right.
Now you can just see my teeth.
Only people watching this on YouTube are going to know what the hell we're talking about. Sorry about that, Apple and Spotify.
Mark is totally
and
gone
wherever
now.
else you're watching.
I can't see him.
Mark's been gone forever.
I'm still here.
Mark has sacrificed his looks for the show.
Mark, come back
Anyway,
into the light.
let's come back to this concept of transactional versus transformative. If I think about like how we view obstacles, right? Like one of the manifestations that I use, and Tony Robbins talked about it. It's, one of the manifestations is I choose to view obstacles as opportunities for growth, right? And that's a mindset, right? It's a growth mindset of what stands before me, I will learn from. What stood behind me, I have learned from and will continue to grow from. But you can't look back. And so if you've got a sacrifice, we're looking at it as this transaction, this exchange, almost like money. But what is it really getting you? Then it goes on to say it's not just religious appeasement. Obviously, we know this. But then performative versus meaningful. Modern society often equates sacrifice with suffering or performative martyrdom rather than quiet, deliberate choices to prioritize others.
Yeah, like I can see people rolling their eyes. Our listeners, hopefully they're not rolling their eyes because it's nuance and it's language. Doesn't it always come back to language? And I think it's how over time we have chosen, whether we are conscious of that or not, to use the word sacrifice. And that's really what's standing out to me in the illumination of the conversation. Even for myself, I'm not really sure I have really thought about it in this way until I'm sitting here thinking about it in this meaningful moment.
Think about it in money, right? And I don't remember if we've talked about this in a previous show or not. I'm pretty sure I brought it up, but one of the concepts that in 2025 was my biggest aha is the theory of compounded interest, not just monetarily, but yes, it was written about in the psychology of money, and it's a great concept. Buffett's talked about it. Great financiers over the years of economists have talked about it. But also, it's talked about in by what's his name, who wrote Atomic Habits, and many others. And that is, we want the now, and we're not willing to wait. And so when you sacrifice, you're giving up, quote unquote, something, even if the net gain in the long term is going to be of greater value, but you don't want to wait for that. And so a series of choices and decisions to sacrifice TV time, quote unquote, to go run, or sacrifice a dinner out to save some money. Over time, those choices will have a compounded benefit that will help you save money, help you be healthier. Spending time with your kids, and so that's the relational side of what's the gain at the end of it for a higher purpose, a greater purpose.
I'm going to have an unpopular question to both of you.
Oh, I can't wait.
So
Phyllis is licking her chops.
So for the last, 20 minutes, I feel like we've talked about semantics in a lot of way. I don't know what that means from the complexity of sacrifice, right? So if I'm investing in my kid, and then I'm going to make that, I'm personally just speaking for, I'm going to make that choice if that's how we define this thing. I feel like we're just trying to justify who gets to use the word sacrifice and who doesn't get to use the word sacrifice. I'm curious, where is the complexity in sacrifice?
Because we don't by nature want to make sacrifices, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to get around having to make the sacrifice.
So here's what I think. This will be maybe even more unpopular than your question, Mark. So get ready.
But wait, there's
more. Are we really talking about sacrifice, or are we really talking about choice? To your point of like machination and nuance of a word, because that's really what's resonating with me. Maybe this show will never air, by the way, but the complexity, and we've talked about this on other shows about making a choice. Like it's hard to make a decision because it feels like you're giving up something sometimes to get something else. And I would say, yes, and that is life. That feels different to me than sacrifice. Like sacrifice feels like life or death, or really, really, I don't want to say it this way, but I think I'm going to, losing something, making a selfless, selfless decision, maybe because you think it's the right thing to do. Maybe you have to come in and like to save a life, like something like that. Something like that. Maybe what I was trying to say in the beginning is actually what I am saying now. I think the complexity, if we were really, like, if we're honing in on a depth of sacrifice, is likely sitting and making that decision, right? How do you actually make a decision to stop part of your life, like really stop part of your life, or make a life-changing decision that in some ways may hurt you, or something like that. The complexity of getting to that decision may be difficult. I mean, there may be complexity in getting that decision. There may be not. There may be complexity in how you feel after you make the decision, or a lifetime later.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, because some of the things are just life choices. Did I want to go and get my graduate degree? Well, I had to make some choices, and I had to give up time in certain areas to do that. But then there's the more complex piece of, well, this choice that I'm making, could it end my life, right? Could it impact negatively the people who are around me? How do I make that choice? How do I know in my heart it's the right choice and still make that choice? I think that is an area to explore, is how do people go through that thought process when making those types of decisions? Not the, should I give up some time and spend more time over here, or should I invest in this and hope to God one day this is going to turn out for me? That to me is not sacrifice. That's just a choice, right? But I think you've hit to the heart of it, which is, how do people have to go through the decision-making process for a true sacrifice?
And I think sometimes it might be, you said this, Mark, sometimes it's just distinctly obvious because it is life or death. Or sometimes it's distinctly obvious because, like, of course you would make that sacrifice for your child. And there's no, I almost think about it like when Tyler Schultz was on the show and we asked him about how hard this was for him to go against the grain and to go against his family. And for him, it was like, well, the moral compass has only been in this one direction. There is no choice. It's very black and white. And in that case, it was what he stood for. And
So is that a sacrifice?
Well, by
his standards,
we're back to the world others would call it, but no, I mean it was a choice that stood in front of him. So technically, yes, it's a sacrifice, but I don't think we can have the conversation around sacrifice and complexity without understanding how the person views what's behind the sacrifice. Selflessness versus selfishness.
I actually am going to say something.
Wait a minute. Are you going to be more controversial? Because so far, I don't think we've really tipped the scale of controversy.
Because I'm wondering if like the show attached to this show, which would be really important, is because I feel like now the complexity is after the decision is made to make the sacrifice. Once you've made the sacrifice, I'm wondering like where complexity sits in your life at that moment in time, after the decision's made.
That's what we need to do. We need to follow up this show with people who have made the sacrifices we're talking about and ask them, was this complex?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. I mean, like, I would love right now to ask a soldier, how do you define sacrifice? I would love to ask.
I don't think that's the question. I mean, maybe it's part of the question, Al, but with complexity being the point of the show, what in your life became more complex, or what in your life is complex because of the decision you made to do a thing?
Yeah.
So let's ask each other that. What's a decision you've made and your life became more complex as a result of that included sacrifice? And
nothing.
I'll give you an example.
No.
I mean, I chose to pursue a business. Prior to this conversation, I wouldn't have ever thought about it through this lens. Thank you to the both of you for screwing my brain up. But I remember saying to people like, yeah, hey, listen, I sacrificed a lot of time away from the kids. I sacrificed, now I got so much in return, both from, the joy, the freedom, some of the experiences. I mean, I've been blessed to dream 1,000 dreams of a life that many people would love to have had experienced. In the moment, though, it felt like a sacrifice. And the complexity came from what was the fallout of that sacrifice. When I gave, quote unquote, up something else for something else, that opportunity cost came with some big tickets. And thus I became to overthink a lot of my decisions because I was afraid of sacrificing.
So just to argue a point, I would say you made some decisions in your life on where you wanted your direction to go, and you took a chance. And some things worked out the exact way you wanted, and some things didn't. And those decisions that you made had impact on where you invested your time and where people invested their time with you. But to me, that's not a sacrifice. That was a decision that you made for a direction in your life. And were things lost because of that? Important things lost because of that? Yes. But in every decision that we make, we have the potential to gain or lose, but that doesn't make it a sacrifice.
So I'm gonna give you an example of what pops into mind. Yeah, yes to that. There used to be some saying, I'm going to get it like slightly wrong. It was in the late 70s or maybe mid 70s for women. It was like, you can have it all. I think that was what it was. Like it used to be on keychains, like you can have it all. And later, I think very wisely, women started saying, you can have it all. You just might not be able to have it all at the same time. And that's how, like, what pops up for me when you're talking. We all make decisions. I just think there's like a fallacy about, I think there's a fallacy about how much time we have in the day.
Yeah.
to do stuff. And there are also external pressures. I mean, I'm not minimizing any of the reality of people's lives, but in the context of this particular conversation, I'll use this. I made a decision with you all that I wanted to be part of this podcast. I wanted to do it. Am I sacrificing anything? No. Has my schedule changed? Yes. Do I have to reorganize when I'm going to work out? Yes, because that's like the window, right? Like that's like the one thing. But is it a sacrifice? No, it was a decision I made because I wanted to do a thing. Am I a little more tired? Sure. Is it a sacrifice? No, it's not.
And here's an interesting caveat that like add on to that, because I love what you're saying. When you look at it later on, so if you call it a sacrifice, even though it's a choice, later on, if it's wildly successful, we have a bajillion listeners and, whatever the success metric of the podcast is.
2 bajillion.
Does that mean none of this was a sacrifice? And alternatively, if it doesn't work out, right, which I don't believe it won't, but if it doesn't, then was it a sacrifice? Right.
No.
So you can't change the definition based on the success or failure of a project. It can't be a sacrifice because the decisions you made didn't work out.
All right, so let me dig the shovel a little deeper. We have 2 diabetics, and we had a wonderful guest, Lori, on our show. Wow, and
Finn
apparently
is very, very
Finn.
He's sacrificing mommy time.
Finn is like, that's what he's going.
That's what's happening. You know who's mad.
Sacrificing a bone and some food. All right, so when Lori Day was on the show, and her son is in fact, Lori, if you're listening to this, please comment on the thread, and if not, we're going to tag you because I'm really interested to see, because we can't answer for you, but what is your view, like, because that was a parent sacrificing, quote unquote, as a parent who had to adjust, a parent who had to pivot. You, Mark, what's your response?
I'll answer from my perspective. I have sacrificed nothing for Harrison's diabetes.
What about his Harrison sacrifice?
Nothing. I think, in fact, and it's going to be the case for, I mean, there's one, he had no decision. It's, type 1 is an autoimmune disease. He had no decision to make that sacrifice or not make a sacrifice. But I think it comes back to a choice. What are you going to do with it? Right? Are you going to say, well, I have this thing and I got to make all these decisions now? He's making the same decisions that he would have had he not had it. So I, as a parent, don't see the things that I've had to do as a sacrifice. They're a choice that I freely want to make. And to see him happy, the choices I made to go back to school as an adult were for my children. I don't see that as a sacrifice. I see that as a plus. There's nothing, I feel like, even taking care of my mom, like Phyllis was talking about, or I don't see any of that as a sacrifice. None of it. It was just decisions of I could choose, I could, or I could choose, I didn't. And my choice said I was going to do that thing, and whatever I lost in it, wasn't a real loss.
I'm really proud of this conversation. Like, this is like one of those conundrums that I never have traversed, and yet I think we've opened up so many different off-ramps to different perspectives, which I hope it elicits some conversation.
Here's yes, Al, thank you for saying that. I think like the complexity is more hinging around, like, I think there's a certain complexity in how we use language, how we use words to describe things. But once we really sit down and talk about it, we start to suss out like the complexity of language and what that means in today's context, and what that means for how, I would say, quite honestly, we treat ourselves, people we love in our lives. Because if we're willing to use interchangeably choice and sacrifice, like, what does that mean? And I'm like, what does that really, I can hear my husband going, this is getting very deep, like in my head, that's what he's saying. But I think that's like, I think there's something there. It's, something I've heard a couple weeks ago, or I've seen, who only, God only knows where I saw it. But instead of saying, I have to go to work, how about saying I get to go to work, right? I think there's like, and that's like a small thing, but it is language, and words have meaning. And we internalize that meaning, and then it becomes what it becomes.
I almost feel, and this may cause some people to be like, I totally disagree, Mark, and you're totally off base for saying this, but I almost feel we would use a word like sacrifice to almost promote one's efforts, not necessarily as a victim, but maybe you could use it that way, of like, look at all the things that I had to do, like to your very honest question about Harrison and type 1. Oh man, I had to sacrifice money and hospital time, and I had to take time off work, and look at me and Maya Copa, and look what I did. Right? That's not how I look at that. And I do think it comes down to, how are you using these words in your life is maybe the complexity itself. If you're constantly look at the things I have to give up for other people, maybe it's time to check the choices that you're making, and just accept the fact that not everything is a sacrifice. You do have choices, and you don't necessarily, there are some things maybe you don't have a choice in. You got to figure out how to make the best of that. I don't know. I mean, I'm struggling with that word sacrifice, especially as we think of folks who give up so much, which is their life for others.
So I put in a prompt, what is the relationship between choice, investment, and sacrifice? And I think this might be a good summary to bring it to like a head here for a definite, like there's going to be another show. Like we've talked about that a few times. Here we go. Choice is the foundational starting point. Dictating sacrifice, what you quote unquote give up to fund what you invest in for a future return. So the core dynamics: choice, the conscious decision to pursue a specific path, goal, or opportunity out of all the available alternatives. It assigns value to what you prioritize. Sacrifice, the intentional forfeiture of time, money, or comfort required to make that choice, quote unquote, the cost of doing business. And then investment, the active allocation of all that sacrificed effort into some sort of asset, skill, relationship, or benefit for the long term for future growth. And I think contextually that kind of summarizes the framework for what we're talking about. Like,
but it doesn't get at the complexity, Al. Like if we're thinking about this through the lens of complexity.
No, the complexity is within those. The complexity comes within the choice. We already know that just choice itself is complex. We make choice far more complex oftentimes than it does need to be. Because you're making first you have to make a choice. Sometimes choice is removed, right?
Sure.
It's removed. But sometimes choice has lots of options, and that is complex. Okay, well then if you make that choice, the quote unquote definition of opportunity cost is, if I make that choice, what are all these other alternatives that I'm not choosing? That's complex. That's where decision regret comes into play, right? And then not understanding that long-term benefit. I think what we three of us agreed to here is that in thinking about quote unquote sacrifice, we're not thinking about the long-term benefit and gain, and as a result, we're short-sighting our choice or our decision, and we're calling it a sacrifice when in actuality it's a true long-term benefit. And
I think we should stop now.
We may have just broken some people's brains, including our own. All right, Mark, what's one lucid or concrete idea that, based on purely on your life's experiences, you would offer up as a thought to folks as it relates to the concept? Your total take, no right, wrong, or indifferent, your take on sacrifice.
I would say be careful of the words that you use. They're powerful.
Did you get that on the bottom of a bazooka wrapper? I mean,
yeah, I mean, but honestly, it could be from some bubble gum. It could be from a fortune cookie. Be careful of the words that you use. Like, I don't believe that anything that we actually talked about today was sacrifice. I think we were trying to define something, and I think that I think when I think we just have to be careful with the words that we use. I think that you make choices in life. Those are your choices to make. Do you have to give things up? Yes. Is that a sacrifice? Not necessarily. So, yeah. So my fortune cookie, concrete, lucid ideas, be careful of the words that you use.
Phil?
I think I had something really good when Mark was talking, and then I got absorbed in what Mark was saying, and now I can't remember what I wanted to say, but I think it sounded something like this. I think I'm just going to say what Mark said. I think there's something about the word sacrifice that feels very heavy. And so I think it would be great for us to bring on some folks to talk about who that's what I was going to say. Okay, it came back to me while I'm stalling for time. It did come back to me. I don't know that any of the three of us have really had to sacrifice much, if anything, in our lifetime. And so it would be really, I think, lovely to have somebody on who has made that decision or has really had to deeply sacrifice. And I think that would be a benefit for all of us, not just the three of us, but our listeners as well, particularly as we've spent a good portion of this show really talking about language and what I think is really the difference between sacrifice and choice. And it may be that sacrifice is subjective and everyone's going to define it differently. But I think there are those who have made ultimate sacrifices or have come close or who have I'll just leave it at that.
Part of me absolutely disagrees and part of me fully agrees. And that's not me taking the middle by decision. I mean, it's still too much thought, Phil, but I would disagree that each of us has made sacrifices. No, I'm not going to speak for you guys. I believe, but I also recognize that what I'm leaving with is what I hoped I would. And what I hope listeners, and I don't even like to call you listeners anymore, our stallmates walk away with, which is, yes, caution on the words, language matters. We've always said that. But then also really ask yourself, what's the difference between choice and sacrifice, and what's the intersection between the two? That's a heavy, heavy topic to start digging into. But I think the framework of the answers to those is based on an individual's life experiences. And, because I've seen, not so much as dramatic in my life, even though I think it's existed, I've seen sacrifice. I've seen people, who have made major sacrifices in their lives for others, from literally body parts, transfusions, things like that, putting their own lives at risk for another. But then also simple things. But now I'm questioning, to your point, is that. And so that's what I leave it with, is like, I would leave people with, ask yourself, what is complex about sacrifice and how does that show up in your life? And we need to figure out who to bring back on the show. And I think we already started to point towards a direction there.
Here's
this
what
is
I
a
would
hell of a
ask
topic.
Our stallmates is this, and sometimes we get some responses and sometimes we don't. But I think that this is one of those subjects where, after you listen, please come to our Facebook page. Please put your definition of sacrifice. What's it?
LinkedIn as well.
LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Or any other
YouTube.
comments you have about
Yeah,
it.
or hey, disagree with us, agree with us, talk to us about it. We really want to get your perspective, and I think this is a subject where we could use your help. We could use your voice in better understanding where you see sacrifice. You know,
And where it's complex.
I look at it as such a dramatic thing, right? I think of in the Old Testament, New Testament, right? All the people who truly sacrificed a lot of stuff. But you may look at it differently, and I think it's an opportunity for us to share that conversation. So please leverage our social media. Please get active. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be able to talk about those comments on the next version of this.
I agree. Thank you.
So sacrifice something else to pay attention to us.
And Al hasn't been listening at all through this entire thing. No.
What?
No?
What?
Who?
What?
Me?
All right. Well, this is chapter 1 of whatever the other chapter will be, because I think I can say of all the shows we've done, and they're voluminous now at this point, I don't know that I've ever left the show going, let's do this some more. Because this topic, I don't know that we'll ever get closure on this topic.
I'm leaving more confused than I started with. So how about that?
Are you confused though, Mark?
No, not really.
I'm not even sure this.
I don't even know who
I wouldn't call this confusion. I think, joking aside, this has been, the AI show was provocative in our world. I think this is, in the best possible way, provocative because it's provoking such a different layer of thought.
Okay.
That in its own right, people would look at this and go, holy shit, yeah, no wonder you guys call this the complexity of toilet paper. Because this, to me, is probably one of the most complex shows we've done.
I love the enthusiasm.
And we'll end on that. Yeah.
This is the complexity of toilet paper.
Did you say toilet paper?
Everything complicated. One big medieval mess.
I'm overthinking. I'm overthinking.